Most people think elite soldiers are fearless. Wrong. They feel the same fear you do. Heart racing, hands shaking, vision narrowing. The difference, they use it. While you panic, they focus. While you freeze, they move. Special forces don't remove fear. They reprogram it. And once you understand how they do this, you'll never experience stress the same way again. Because fear, properly trained, becomes one of the most powerful focus tools your brain has. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how they do it. 3 systems, used by Navy SEALs, Delta Force, and other Tier 1 units. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why what you call anxiety is actually unused cognitive fuel. Chapter 1, the adrenaline paradox. Most people think adrenaline ruins performance. Wrong. Adrenaline sharpens performance. But only if your brain knows what to do with it. When you feel fear, your body activates the fight or flight response. Heart rate spikes, breathing accelerates. Your brain releases adrenaline and cortisol. Most people experience this as panic, tunnel vision, racing thoughts, loss of control. But elite soldiers experience something different, clarity, because they train their brains to interpret adrenaline differently. Psychologist Kelly McGonigal from Stanford studied this phenomenon. She discovered something fascinating. People who interpret stress as performance fuel perform dramatically better under pressure. Same hormones, same physiological response, different interpretation. Your brain labels the signal. If your brain thinks stress equals danger, you panic. If your brain thinks stress equals readiness, you focus. Special forces train this reinterpretation deliberately. During SEAL training, instructors constantly push recruits into controlled stress. Explosions, sleep deprivation, extreme physical exhaustion. But they repeat one message over and over. You're racing hard, that's power. You're shaking hands, that's energy. You're fast breathing, that's oxygen loading for action. They're teaching the brain a new equation. Fear equals readiness, and over time the brain rewires. Neuroscientists call this cognitive reappraisal, and it literally changes how the brain processes stress. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, stops treating adrenaline like a threat. Instead, the prefrontal cortex takes control. That's the decision-making part of your brain. So instead of panic, you get focus. But here's the problem though. Reframing fear only works if your brain has a plan. Otherwise, adrenaline still overwhelms you, which leads to the second system. Chapter 2, stress inoculation. Imagine 2 people. One hears gunfire for the first time. Panic, chaos, freeze response. The other hears gunfire and calmly returns fire. Same brain, different training. Psychologist Donald Meichenbaum developed something called stress inoculation training. The idea is simple. Small doses of stress build psychological immunity exactly like vaccines. A vaccine gives your body a small controlled exposure to a virus. Your immune system learns to handle it. Next time, no panic. Special forces apply the same concept to fear. They deliberately expose themselves to escalating stress. Over and over and over again. Live fire drills, combat simulations, sleep deprivation exercises, chaos environments, sirens, explosions, screaming instructors. Why? Because the brain adapts. The first time you experience intense stress, your brain says, we're dying. The 10th time, this again. This the 100th time, routine. Surely your nervous system recalibrates. What used to feel terrifying now feels normal. Researchers call this habituation. Repeated exposure reduces emotional intensity, which is why rookie soldiers panic and veterans stay calm. They've seen it before. Your brain isn't afraid of what it recognizes. But here's the part most people miss. You don't need a battlefield to train this. You can create controlled stress environments yourself. Cold showers, high-pressure presentations, difficult conversations, hard workouts, public speaking. Every time you voluntarily enter discomfort, your brain learns something. Stress is survivable, and that lesson rewires your nervous system. But even stress training isn't enough, because fear does something dangerous to the brain. It shrinks your attention, which leads to the third system. Chapter 3, the focus tunnel. Fear narrows your perception. Evolution designed it this way. When your ancestors faced a predator, they didn't need to notice flowers. They needed to notice teeth. So fear compresses your attention. Your visual field narrows, your hearing changes. Your brain filters information aggressively. Most people experience this as confusion. Special forces experience it as precision. Why? Because they train attention. During combat training, soldiers learn something called task fixation. Focus on the mission. Ignore everything else. Bullets flying, irrelevant. Noise, irrelevant. Pain, irrelevant. Only the objective matters. Researchers studying police officers discovered something interesting. Under extreme stress, untrained people lose up to 80% of their situational awareness. They miss obvious details, they forget procedures. They freeze. But trained operators maintain clarity because they anchor their attention to a single priority. One task, one objective, one next step. Not the entire situation, just the next action. Special forces call this the next 10 seconds rule. Don't think about the entire mission. Think about the next 10 seconds. Clear the doorway, move to cover, reload, advance. Fear overwhelms the brain when it faces complexity. Break the mission into microtasks, and fear disappears. Psychologists call this cognitive chunking. Your brain handles small tasks easily. Big problems create panic. Small steps create momentum. This is why elite units train procedures endlessly. Clear room, stack formation, communication patterns. They repeat them thousands of times. So when stress hits, they don't think, they execute. Muscle memory takes over. But here's the problem though. Even trained soldiers can still panic because fear has a second weapon. Your breathing. Chapter 4, the breathing override. When fear hits, your breathing becomes shallow and fast. Your body thinks it's helping. More oxygen, more energy, but something else happens. Your brain loses carbon dioxide balance. That disrupts neural stability. Your vision narrows. Your hands shake. Your thinking becomes chaotic. Elite soldiers know this. So they control the one system that controls everything else. Breathing. The US military teaches a technique called combat breathing, also known as box breathing. 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold, repeat. This simple rhythm does something powerful. It tells your nervous system, threat under control. Your heart rate drops, your cortisol stabilizes. Your brain regains executive function. Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine teaches this exact technique to Special Forces units because controlled breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the calming system, the opposite of fight or flight. So instead of trying to eliminate fear, they regulate it. Fear becomes a controlled burn instead of a wildfire. This is why elite soldiers often look calm during chaos. They're not calm, they're regulated. But here's the thing though, even breathing and training aren't the real secret. The real advantage comes from something deeper, something most people never train. Mental rehearsal. Chapter 5, the brain simulator. Before elite soldiers ever enter combat, they've already fought the battle hundreds of times, inside their head. Special Forces units rely heavily on visualization training. They mentally rehearse missions step by step. Every movement, every decision, every potential complication. Why does this work? Because your brain struggles to distinguish imagination from reality. Neuroscience studies using fMRI scans show that visualization activates many of the same neural circuits as physical practice. Motor cortex, sensory regions, decision networks, all firing. Olympic athletes use this technique constantly. So do fighter pilots. So do surgeons. Special forces take it even further. They rehearse failure scenarios. What if the door doesn't open? What if communications fail? What if someone gets injured? They imagine the chaos before it happens. So when real chaos arrives, it feels familiar. Your brain hates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates fear. But familiarity creates confidence. And visualization builds familiarity before the operation even begins. But here's the problem though. You can understand all of this. Adrenaline reinterpretation, stress exposure, focus narrowing, controlled breathing, mental rehearsal, and still fail under pressure. Because there's one final factor. The environment. Chapter 6, identity pressure. Average people perform under evaluation. Elite units perform under identity. There's a huge difference. If your identity is weak, stress breaks you. If your identity is strong, stress activates you. Special Forces culture is built around this. You are not just an individual. You represent the team, your unit, your brothers. Failure isn't personal embarrassment. It's betrayal. Psychologists call this identity-based motivation. When your actions reflect who you believe you are, your brain unlocks extraordinary resilience. A Navy SEAL doesn't ask, "Can I handle this?" He asks, "What does a SEAL do here?" And that identity answers the question. Move forward, execute, complete the mission. Fear becomes irrelevant because identity overrides emotion. And this is the real secret. Elite performers don't rely on motivation. They rely on identity. But here's the thing though. Once you understand these systems, fear stops looking like an enemy. It starts looking like a tool. Your racing heart, fuel, your adrenaline. Focus chemical, your stress, preparation signal. Fear is not weakness, fear is unused capacity. Special forces simply learned how to use it. Which means you can too. Reinterpret adrenaline. Expose yourself to controlled stress. Focus on the next step. Control your breathing, rehearse the scenario. Build an identity that doesn't quit. Do this consistently, and the same emotion that once paralyzed you will become your sharpest weapon. But here's the final problem. Even if you master fear, most people still fail under pressure. Not because of emotion, because of mental fatigue. Your brain simply runs out of energy. That's why elite operators train another system most people ignore. A system that allows them to stay sharp even after 72 hours without sleep. And once you understand how that works, you'll realize your brain has far more capacity than you think. That's why I made the next video breaking down how elite units maintain extreme focus under total exhaustion. Watch it next. Your brain will never feel tired the same way again. Create a new script entitled